Oh, Sabi guys, coming back at you all with another video. This time we're going to be talking about something that's pretty damn important to me, and I know it is to a lot of you guys. It's the difference between limited and constructed, and this isn't something that a lot of people talk about, especially on YouTube. I couldn't find any videos of people actually just going into depth here and explaining the crucial differences, the pros and the cons. You know, what's the benefit of one format over the other? You know, what's the benefit to attending a pre-release? What's the benefit of attending a draft day? You know, what's the benefit of building a 60 card deck and going to multiple events over the course of a few months, being able to replay with the same cards, the same deck, versus only being able to use cards from a 45 card pool or a 90 card pool. This is something that might seem subjective to you, but there really are a lot of significant differences between constructed and limited, and I thought it would be very important to just go over it in a video. Before we get into the differences, let's go into details what exactly these are. Constructed is simple. Formats such as Standard, Frontier, Modern, Legacy, Vintage, Pauper, and Commander are all constructed formats because they have similar constraints. These are typically 60 card decks, Commander being 100 cards, but the constraints themselves vary between these different formats within Constructed overall. Pauper is a common only format. Frontier and Modern are start and go formats, meaning that they start at a certain point in Magic's history and they go on from there. Modern starting from 8th edition onward, and Frontier from M15 onward. And Standard is typically the past 2 years of Magic sets that have been released, and you make 60 card decks using those cards only. Whereas Legacy and Vintage are eternal formats. The only difference between them are the cards that are legal because of the ban list. Certain cards you can play in Vintage, certain cards you can't play in Legacy. Pauper and Commander are also eternal formats. And eternal formats are essentially just formats where you can play cards from every single set in Magic's history, dating all the way back to Alpha and all the way up to the current set. Limited is essentially as it sounds, it's limited. You're using cards from a specific card pool, and you don't get to choose what those cards are outside of actually just drafting. And the only two ways that you really play limited are sealed, which is where you get 6 packs, 15 cards each, so you have in total a 90 card pool to work with, and you make a deck with a minimum of 40 cards to work with out of those 90 cards in that pool. Whereas draft is typically you have 3 packs of 15 cards, and you pick one individual card out of those packs until they're all gone. You take turns with your opponents doing the same exact thing. So you have to basically make a deck out of those cards that you either pick in the draft or the ones that you pull either regular sealed events or just pre-release. So going over the pros for the constructed format, you have the ability to optimize your decks. When you have the constraints from an eternal format such as Legacy, Vintage, Commander, you have the ability to choose the best possible cards. Yes, it's going to cost you more money to get the absolute best options, but hey, if you absolutely want to optimize your decks, you have that ability. Whereas in Limited, you don't really have that option. You're basically trying to make the best out of whatever situation you get. Another benefit is that there are multiple different formats to choose from, and there are some that people experiment with. They try to create new formats, and some of them work. One of the newer formats that people are trying to work with is Frontier, and that is of course using cards from the core set M15 onward. So you have the luxury of just options. You're not stuck with one format specifically, whereas in Limited you're really just stuck with either sealed or draft. Another pro is that you have eternal playability, literally the ability to make use out of cards from all the way back in Alpha and the newest sets. There's really no boundaries here. You can make new formats if you want to and set your constraints there, but a lot of people love having these restrictions when building a deck because it makes it more interesting. You have sets such as Modern where people enjoy playing in the modern era of cards, or they like playing eternally and they play either Legacy or Vintage or Commander to really sort of take advantage of all the cards throughout Magic's history. And a lot of people take enjoyment out of following sort of the rules and trying to construct their decks around them. So it's very fun, it's very entertaining, and it's definitely something that you can learn with. You can build the same deck, so it's pretty cool. And it's also a big factor that you get to play with the same decks over and over again, whereas with Limited it's just a one-time thing. You get to introduce new players to the game with Constructed primarily. It's a lot easier for a new player to get used to the same deck, learn how it functions, learn all the interactions over and over again. This is how you learn to become a better player, just by studying your own deck. Just work with it repeatedly and trying to learn all the ins and outs of it. That way when you move on to another deck it's a little bit easier, but you really get to learn with one deck, so you're not just going on from one to another. You can sort of develop this comfort zone when you're playing with the same deck. You really kind of play it better than anybody else would. However, there's a downside to that too, but we'll get to that later. Playing with the same deck, you can really learn how to master a specific deck, and it can be really difficult to beat you once you're playing the same deck over and over again, and just learn how to become a master of that specific strategy. Really good in that aspect. Now the pros for Limited is pretty simple. Everybody starts off at the same point. You all have around the same amount of money that you're investing into a specific sealed event or a draft event. No one's paying more or less for that same event unless you want to buy additional things such as a deck box or card sleeves for the cards that you're drafting or opening in sealed. That's about it though. Everybody starts at relatively the same spot, so nobody really feels like they're being cheated out of money. And it is also a lower cost to play versus going to something like a modern event where the average deck is a couple $1,000s. Definitely expensive to play bigger formats like that, whereas with sealed, things like that, pre-release events, you're typically not going to be spending more than $30 at a time. And those sealed events do kind of vary, usually 1 to 2 a month. So overall, you might be spending $60 a month just on sealed and limited events in general. Whereas with Constructed, you could spend thousands of dollars on one deck and go to multiple different events. So it really is kind of subjective. You know, you probably don't spend as much money if you're just a pre-release player. Yeah, you're spending, $30 over the course of a year, every single set that releases. Over time, you might be spending more money than the player who just invests a lot of money one time into a good legacy deck and they stick with it. Overall, it is relatively lower in cost compared to other options. It's also a great way to introduce yourself to a new set, such as Ixalan, the newest one that we have now. If you are curious about the ins and outs of that set, what cards are good, it's a great way to familiarize yourself with the set. Just study all the good limited bombs, and hopefully that can help your understanding for when you want to transfer to a constructed format. You know what cards were good in limited, so you have a better understanding of that set. Definitely a great way to grow your knowledge of the game. Also, it's just refreshing. You never really have the same exact experience going into another set, going into another event, and you have sealed and you have booster drafts that can help you do that. Just so refreshing. You're never going to be playing with exactly the same players either, so you have different play styles affecting gameplay altogether. And maybe you didn't like the way you played at last week's event. Maybe this week's event you're going to change it up a bit. So there's different ways that you can go into a pre-release or sealed event in general. Maybe you went more aggro last time. Maybe you want to go more of a control route. Maybe you want to try mid-range. Maybe you want to go with tempo. Who knows? Now, both of these have pretty good pros, but there are also some notable cons. For Constructed, we must mention the fact that there is a ton of net decking in Standard, primarily. You also have that in Modern. You also have it in Legacy. And this is one of the major complaints for those formats. A lot of people, mainly when they're talking about Pro Tours, mainly when they're talking about Grand Prix, just big events, wherever there's a pro scene involved, everybody's usually going to lean towards the favored deck. And just for example, Aetherworks Marvel, the Teamer Energy deck, was a pretty big problem. Being able to cheat and play in Ulamog was a big deal, and it made up about 40% of the meta. Not something that you want. So typically when people see so many different decks, they want to play that deck. They feel like it gives them a better chance of winning, and they're typically wrong, because while it does technically give that deck a better chance of winning, it's because there's 40% of the meta is consumed by that deck. So yes, that deck's going to have a better chance of winning big at Pro Tours because more people are playing it, and it is also buy to win to a very big degree. I don't like using this as an excuse unless we're playing a more casual format such as Commander, where It's not competitive. There's really no competitive pro scene for it. They're trying to push it now online for dual commander, which is completely different from casual 4-player commander. But especially when we look at standard, it is sort of the big deal here where, you know, if you have $500, you're probably going to be able to play a pretty good deck. If you maybe only have a couple hundred, you might be able to make something that's hyper competitive. It is kind of a problem because player skill doesn't really dictate as much as how much money do you have in your wallet. So that is an issue. I don't like always using this as an excuse because there are many situations. Pretty much everybody has the same amount of money, or relatively the same amount of money, maybe like a few $100s each in their standard decks. And that's sort of like what they do with their decks. They have the same amount of money invested in their decks. At that point, it just comes down to player skill. Another con for Constructed is the fact that there is a ban list for every single Constructed format. Some ban lists are more strict than others. In Standard, we're not used to having the ban list become a factor. This past year has been quite a different story. Commander, the ban list is hardly ever a factor. Maybe 1 to 2 cards ever get banned in a year. Not that big of a deal. You're playing a singleton format. Typically, it's easy to replace just 1 card in your deck. But this is very different from Limited, where whatever you pull, you get to use. There's no restrictions. So that's definitely a weight that you can take off your mind. You don't have to worry about, oh, can I play this card? Is it legal? You don't have to worry about that at all. Even if something is banned currently in Standard, it doesn't matter. Whatever you get in Limited, you can play it. There are also some cons for Limited. We have to talk about the fact it's pretty obvious. There's limited playability. Whatever cards you get at pre-release, whatever cards you get in booster drafts, you have to recognize the fact that most of those cards that are going to be pulling a lot of weight for you in your games are likely not going to have the same impact in Constructed. Something that's likely going to be a good card in Limited, you know, good keywords, First Strike, your lifelink, flying, good evasion. Those creatures might be good and Limited, but in other formats where there's more competitiveness, there's more aggro, there's more control, there's more removal, there's a lot better consistency, typically those cards don't really shine as bright. You also have the factor that there are just very limited amount of events available for Limited players. You have just pre-release and you have draft. If you're lucky, you can find a good LGS that supports multiple of these events a month. Hopefully you get to do multiple pre-releases in a month. Hopefully you get to do multiple draft events in a month. But it's not like Constructed formats where you could go to a game store that does multiple events a week. Same can't be said, so you kind of have to savor Limited while you can, especially if you really enjoy a specific set. You're probably never going to be able to do it again, especially at your local game store, so keep that in mind. And another con, very big con, is the luck factor. This is very important because this can really determine whether or not you feel confident enough to play Limited, or you just feel like you're going to have a good time playing Limited. I've seen just the most average players, you know, even the most subpar players, just do amazingly well at pre-release events because they end up getting the bomb mythic or the bomb rare in the set. That's typically going to carry them to a 4-0 finish. And it's very annoying because, I mean, it's all luck. Not to say that you're not going to be able to beat these type of lucky players at sealed events, but chances are, even if you're a good player, if you get screwed in your packs and you just don't do too well, it doesn't really matter how well you are. You can only play your way out of so many situations. Limited removal, if you just don't get good enough removal, you don't get enough answers to deal with problems that your opponents have, it can be very difficult. You get absolutely no good rares, no mythics at all. Very difficult to get out of that situation, especially if you're playing players that just get all the luck in the world. I will say there is a bit of a difference though with draft. You don't necessarily have this room for error that you do with sealed. You get a 90 card pool for sealed. You get 6 packs. With draft you typically have 3 packs. So you end up with a 45 card pool instead of a 90 card pool. And you have to create a 40 card deck using just those cards, so the margin for error, it's very slim, and typically the average players are going to suffer more during drafts. There's more effort involved in drafting, and I definitely love that aspect of draft. So overall, I would say my favorite part about the Constructed formats is the fact that you have replay value. It's a term that is commonly used to describe video games. The ability to go back and play an older game. Is it going to satisfy you now? Well, many constructed formats, you can hold on to a deck and spend years playing the same deck without having to worry about losing cards to the ban list, losing cards to a rotation. Standard's obviously an exception, but you just have the ability to sort of build an identity with a deck. Whereas with the limited, you kind of have to just start over fresh every single time you want to join an event. You don't have that problem with constructed. You can just build a deck, take the time. You have the luxury of time on your side, so you don't have all this pressure. There's more of a comfort level in constructed formats because of that factor. I absolutely love limited though. I think that if you want to up your skills as a player, you have to put yourself in the highest pressure situations. And to me, I feel like those are in draft, in sealed events where you have a limited amount of time to build your decks. You have a limited amount of time to evaluate the total value of your cards. You know, which cards are going to be good for limited, which cards are going to be just bombs. You know, you have to identify good value cards, and you also have to evaluate what your opponents are going to be playing. You have to be able to take the best cards available, not because they synergize well with your decks, but because they might synergize well with your opponents. So you have that aspect of you're playing multiple different games in limited. It's not just the actual card game, but you play mind games as well. But really, it is subjective when it comes down to it. There are enough pros and cons for either to really justify playing one or playing both. Primarily, if you want to improve your game all around, play both. Play both constructed and limited. It's the best way to grow as a Magic player. So anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was a big help to you who are maybe confused about the subject. Hope I could definitely help you out there. Anyway guys, Void here, signing off. You all have a wonderful day.